The quiet suburbs of Pine Valley harbored their share of secrets, but none quite like Rachel Morrison. Some say the most dangerous warriors are the ones who heal before they fight, and Rachel was about to prove just how right they were. This is the story of how the notorious Shadow Syndicate made the fatal mistake of threatening a woman whose gentle bedside manner masked a past written in battlefield valor and combat medicine. Pine Valley Regional Hospital stood like a beacon of hope against the crisp autumn skyline, its modern glass facade reflecting the late afternoon sun. Most of the day shift had already clocked out, leaving the halls to the quiet efficiency of the night crew. But Rachel Morrison sat motionless at the nurses' station of the emergency department, her untouched coffee growing cold as she reviewed patient charts with meticulous precision. Unlike the other nurses who rushed between trauma bays with controlled chaos, Rachel moved with a distinctive calm that her colleagues found both reassuring and slightly unnerving. Perhaps it was the way she handled even the most critical cases with an almost supernatural composure, or maybe it was her eyes, warm brown that could shift to tactical awareness in split seconds, carrying shadows that no one dared to count. Dr. James Chen, the ED director, had raised eyebrows when he specifically requested Rachel for the night shift trauma team 3 months ago, but none could deny the dramatic improvement in patient outcomes since her arrival. The usual panic that accompanied major traumas seemed to dissolve whenever her presence filled a room, though she'd never raised her voice or displayed anything but absolute professionalism. The whispers about her past traveled through hospital corridors like autumn leaves, each telling different but equally fascinating tales. Some claimed she'd served in classified military operations. Others swore she'd worked with Doctors Without Borders in active war zones. A few veteran nurses muttered about a legendary combat medic who disappeared after a classified operation in Kandahar, but Rachel never confirmed nor denied any of the stories. The emergency department's quiet efficiency shattered as the ambulance bay doors burst open, paramedics rushing in with a victim of what appeared to be a brutal assault. The patient's face was badly beaten, his expensive suit torn and bloodied. Rachel recognized him immediately, Marcus Chen, Dr. Chen's younger brother and the district attorney who'd been making headlines for his aggressive prosecution of organized crime. Multiple blunt force injuries, possible internal bleeding, the lead paramedic reported, his voice tight with urgency. Found behind his office downtown, BP dropping, pulse thready. Rachel's movements were precise and measured as she joined. The trauma team, each action deliberate as a combat drill practiced 1,000 times. Head nurse Sandra Cooper appeared at Rachel's side, her aged face creased with concern. 3 more coming in, she spoke softly, her eyes never leaving the monitors. All wearing expensive suits, all beaten the same way. Word is they're all from the DA's office. Before Rachel could respond, Marcus Chen's eyes flew open, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "The Shadow Syndicate," he gasped, blood staining his lips. "They said this was a message, said they own this city now." His eyes rolled back as the monitors screamed their warning. "He's crashing!" Dr. Weber shouted, but Rachel was already moving. Her hands flew over the patient with practiced efficiency, performing procedures that seemed beyond standard nursing protocols. The trauma team watched in amazement as she stabilized him, using techniques they'd never seen before, her movements carrying the unmistakable mark of battlefield medicine. "Where did you learn that?" Dr. Weber asked later, his voice carrying both admiration and curiosity. But Rachel just offered a quiet smile, her focus already shifting to the other victims being rushed through the doors. The night was young and something told her this was just the beginning. Outside, the autumn wind carried the scent of approaching winter, and with it, whispers of violence to come. The Shadow Syndicate had been pushing into the city with increasing boldness, each move more daring than the last. Now they'd crossed a line, attacking the district attorney's office directly, sending a message written in blood and broken bones. Sandra Cooper watched Rachel work, noting how her hands never trembled, how her eyes constantly scanned the room, despite appearing focused on her tasks. The older nurse had seen her share of medical professionals over 30 years in emergency medicine, but something about Rachel was different. It wasn't just skill, it was the kind of situational awareness that came from working under much more dangerous conditions than a suburban emergency room. This is before. It gets better, Sandra muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Rachel's slight nod was the only indication she'd heard, but her hands moved with even more purpose as she prepared for what they both knew was coming. Across town, in a penthouse office overlooking the city, a man known only as the Director received news of the night's activities. The attacks on the DA's office had gone as planned, but something about the reports troubled him. The survival rate of the victims was unusually high, their injuries expertly treated by what witnesses described as a remarkably skilled nurse. "Find out everything about this nurse," he commanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that brooked no argument. Something's not right about her. Nobody's that good without a reason. The Director had no way of knowing, but as he issued his orders, Rachel Morrison was already preparing for what would come next. Some battles were fought with guns and bombs, others with syringes and surgical skill. Tonight, she would need both, sets of skills and more. Pine Valley Regional's emergency department thrummed with the controlled chaos that marked the transition between day and evening shifts. Rachel Morrison stood at the nurse's station, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her blue scrubs pristine despite the hectic nature of her work. To casual observers, she appeared no different from any other experienced nurse, competent, professional, and quietly efficient. But there was something in the way she moved that set her apart, though few could pinpoint exactly what. Each action was precise, economical, as if every gesture had been honed by experiences far removed from this suburban hospital. When she checked supplies, her hands moved with systematic efficiency, unconsciously arranging equipment in ways that would allow for quickest access during a crisis. Her colleague joked that she could probably find anything in the supply room blindfolded. The ED's newest resident, Dr. Sarah Kim, watched Rachel work with undisguised fascination. "I've never seen anyone maintain that level of calm during a mass casualty incident," she commented to Sandra Cooper, referencing last night's events. 4 critical traumas at once, and she didn't even break a sweat. Sandra glanced at Rachel, noting how she positioned herself with clear sightlines to all entrances while reviewing patient charts. "Did you notice how she treated Marcus Chen's pneumothorax?" the older nurse asked quietly. "That needle decompression technique, that's not something they teach in nursing school." Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "Military training, maybe. The way she handles mass casualties, it's like she's working from a different playbook entirely." She paused, watching Rachel efficiently organize the trauma bay. But why would someone with that level of experience choose to work nights in a suburban ED? The answer to that question lay buried in heavily redacted military files and classified mission reports, in memories Rachel kept locked away as carefully as her old combat medical kit. The kit still sat in her apartment, hidden but always ready, its contents speaking to skills far beyond standard emergency medicine. Rachel moved through her shift with characteristic focus, but her mind processed everything around her. She noted the 2 new security guards in the ED, their stance and bearing marking them as recent military veterans. Dr. Chen had quietly doubled security after last night's attacks, though he hadn't announced it officially. The Shadow Syndicate's message had been received loud and clear. 4 senior prosecutors from the DA's office, all attacked within hours of each other. The brutality of the assault spoke to professional enforcers, not common thugs. Rachel recognized the pattern. She'd seen similar tactics in war zones, where criminal organizations sought to undermine civil authority through calculated violence. "Miss Morrison?" A young voice interrupted her thoughts. Tommy Chen, Dr. Chen's teenage son, stood nearby, holding a paper bag. "Dad asked me to bring you some dinner. He said you worked straight through your break again last night." Rachel accepted the bag with a gentle smile. Tommy had been spending more time in the ED lately, supposedly working on a school project about emergency medicine. But Rachel had noticed how his visits increased after his uncle Marcus was attacked. The boy was worried about his family, though he tried to hide it behind teenage bravado. "How's Uncle Marcus doing?" Tommy asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide his concern. Rachel led him to a quieter corner of the nurse's station, away from other ears. "Better," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority that seemed to naturally calm patients and their families. "Your uncle is tough. He's already asking about his cases." She didn't mention that Marcus Chen had been asking specifically about the Shadow Syndicate investigation, his determination undiminished. By the attack, Tommy nodded, but something in his expression made Rachel pause. The boy was fidgeting with his phone, a nervous tell she'd noticed before. "Tommy," she said softly, "is there something else?" He glanced around before leaning closer. "I overheard Dad talking last night. The police think there's a leak in the hospital. Someone knew exactly when Uncle Marcus would be working late, knew his routine." His voice dropped even lower. "And now there are these new patients, gang members, asking a lot of questions about the ED staff." Rachel's expression didn't change, but her mind was already calculating implications, identifying potential threats. The Shadow Syndicate was gathering intelligence, preparing for something bigger. She'd seen this pattern before, in places where the line between medicine and combat blurred into survival. "Thank you for telling me," she said, giving Tommy's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Your dad's taking all the necessary precautions." She didn't mention the extra security measures she'd quietly implemented herself, the subtle rearrangement of supplies, the mental mapping of evacuation routes. As Tommy left, Sandra Cooper approached with a fresh stack of charts. "That boy's taken quite a shine to you," she observed. "The whole Chen family has, really." Her eyes met Rachel's with knowing concern. "They're good people, don't deserve what's happening." Rachel accepted the charts, her movements deliberate, as she reviewed them. "No, they don't," she agreed quietly. What she didn't say was that she'd seen good people destroyed by violence before, had watched communities torn apart by organized crime in war-torn regions. She'd sworn an oath to heal, but experience had taught her that sometimes healing meant stopping the wound before it happened. The ED doors slid open, admitting a group of young men with relatively minor injuries. Rachel recognized the signs immediately. Expensive watches, subtle gang tattoos, the way they carried themselves with calculated arrogance. They were Shadow Syndicate soldiers, here to case the hospital under the guise of seeking treatment. "I'll take them," Rachel said to Sandra, her voice carrying its usual professional calm. As she approached the new arrivals, her stance shifted imperceptibly, muscle memory from another life adjusting to potential threats while maintaining her nurse's demeanor. The night was still young, and Rachel Morrison knew better than most that sometimes the most critical battles were fought not with weapons, but with knowledge, preparation, and the ability to see the storm coming before the first drops fell. The emergency department's rhythmic calm shattered as 5 ambulances screamed into the bay, their sirens piercing the night air. Rachel's practiced eye took in the scene through the glass doors. Multiple gunshot victims, all wearing the expensive suits and subtle identifiers of Shadow Syndicate members. Their wounds spoke of a professional hit, precise shots, maximum damage. "Mass casualty incident," Dr. Chen announced, his voice carrying across the ED. "Morrison, take lead on triage." The choice raised eyebrows among newer staff, but Rachel was already moving, her actions flowing with practiced efficiency that spoke of countless similar scenarios. The first victim rolled in, a man with 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. Viktor Petrov, one of the paramedics reported, found outside the Obsidian nightclub, multiple GSWs, pressure dropping. Rachel recognized the name. Petrov was the syndicate's financial architect, the man who turned their criminal earnings into legitimate-looking investments. Bay 3, Rachel directed, her hands already moving to assess the wounds. The bullet patterns were familiar. She'd seen similar groupings in combat zones, the signature of special operations teams. This wasn't gang warfare. This was military precision. Sandra Cooper appeared at her side as the second victim arrived. 4 more incoming from different locations, she reported quietly. All high-ranking syndicate members, all hit within minutes of each other. Her eyes met Rachel's, understanding passing between them. This was a coordinated attack, designed to decapitate the syndicate's leadership. The ED transformed into a battlefield of a different kind. Rachel moved between trauma bays with fluid grace, her hands sure and steady as she worked to save lives she suspected might be better ended. But she'd sworn an oath, first in the military, then in nursing, and she would honor it, regardless of who lay on her table. "Where did you learn this technique?" Dr. Kim asked, as she watched Rachel stabilize a particularly difficult case using an unconventional method. The younger doctor's eyes were wide with admiration and curiosity. "You pick things up," Rachel replied softly, her focus never wavering from the patient. But her mind was already racing ahead, analyzing patterns. The attacks were too precise, too professional. Someone with serious military background was moving against the syndicate, and tonight's casualties were just the opening salvo. Through the trauma bay windows, Rachel caught glimpses of unfamiliar faces in the ED waiting room. Men with hard eyes and concealed weapons, watching the medical team work on their fallen comrades. The syndicate was gathering, preparing to respond to this attack on their leadership, Miss Morrison. Tommy Chen's voice was urgent as he appeared at her side, his young face tight with worry. "Dad sent me to tell you there's chatter on the police band. Multiple shootings across the city, all targeting syndicate operations. They're saying it's some kind of special forces team, maybe government black ops." Rachel's hands never paused in their work, but her mind shifted through implications with tactical precision. A coordinated strike against organized crime shouldn't concern a suburban ED nurse, but Rachel knew better. Violence like this escalated, spread, consumed everything in its path. She'd seen it before in places where military operations and criminal enterprises collided. "The director is coming," one of the wounded men gasped as Rachel checked his bandages. "He wants—" The man's eyes rolled back as his pressure dropped, but Rachel had heard enough. The director, the Shadow Syndicate's mysterious leader, never appeared in public. If he was coming to the hospital, the situation was more volatile than even she had suspected. Dr. Chen appeared in the trauma bay doorway, his usual calm demeanor showing signs of strain. "Rachel, a word." He led her to a quiet corner away from prying ears. "I just got off the phone with some contacts. The people targeting the syndicate, they're called the Phoenix Unit. Black Ops team officially doesn't exist. They specialize in dismantling criminal organizations." Rachel's face revealed nothing, but her pulse quickened slightly. She knew the Phoenix Unit had worked alongside them in another life. Their presence meant this situation was about to become much more complicated. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued, his voice dropping lower. "They're not just after the syndicate. They're looking for someone, a combat medic who disappeared after a classified operation in Kandahar. Someone they say could expose a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top." Rachel's hands unconsciously adjusted her ID badge, a habit that helped her maintain focus. "Why tell me this?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Because I've seen your personnel file, the real one, Dr. Chen replied, watching her carefully. I have friends in high places too, Rachel, or should I say, Lieutenant Morrison. Before Rachel could respond, Sandra Cooper's voice cut through the tension. Multiple traumas incoming, gang violence spreading across the city. The Phoenix unit's attack had sparked a war, and Pine Valley Regional was about to become its epicenter. Rachel moved back toward the trauma bays, her mind already shifting to combat protocols, even as she maintained her nurse's demeanor. Tonight, she would need every skill from both her lives, the healer and the warrior. As she prepared for the incoming casualties, Rachel caught her reflection in a window. For a moment, she saw not the calm ED nurse, but the combat medic she'd been, the woman who'd learned that sometimes healing meant fighting, and sometimes fighting meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Dr. Chen's revelation hung in the air between them as Rachel worked, each movement precise, despite the chaos surrounding them. The Phoenix unit's presence changed everything. They weren't just any special operations team. Memory flashed through her mind. The taste of desert dust, the thunder of helicopters, and a mission that had gone terribly wrong in ways that still haunted her dreams. Sandra Cooper observed Rachel's subtle shift in demeanor as more casualties poured in. You know them, don't you? The older nurse asked quietly while they restocked trauma supplies. The ones doing this. The Phoenix unit. Her eyes carried the wisdom of 30 years in emergency medicine, seeing what others missed. Before Rachel could respond, the ED doors burst open. A woman strode in, her military bearing obvious, despite civilian clothes. Captain Sarah Martinez. Rachel would have recognized her anywhere. They'd served together in the Phoenix unit's medical division before everything went sideways in Kandahar. Multiple GSWs incoming, Martinez announced, flashing credentials that identified her as a federal agent. I need to speak with your trauma team leader. Her eyes locked with Rachel's, recognition flashing between them like lightning. Hello, Lieutenant. Been a while. The using of her former rank confirmed Rachel's fears. If Martinez was here openly, the situation was worse than she'd imagined. 3 minutes, Rachel replied, her voice carrying the same quiet authority she'd used in combat triage. Let me stabilize this patient. As Rachel worked, her mind raced through implications. The Phoenix unit wouldn't surface without reason, wouldn't risk exposure unless something bigger was at stake. The attacks on the Syndicate weren't random. They were looking for something or someone. The man they called the Director, Martinez said later when they found a moment of privacy in the ED's small break room. He's not just another crime boss. We've identified him as Colonel James Harrison, former Special Operations Command. He went dark after Kandahar, disappeared with classified files that could compromise national security. Rachel's hands stilled on her coffee cup. Colonel Harrison. The name brought back memories she'd tried to bury. The medical protocols, she said softly, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. The experimental combat medicine program, Martinez nodded grimly. He's been using the Syndicate to test advanced medical techniques on civilians, procedures that were deemed too dangerous for military application. The same procedures that got our unit shut down after Kandahar. The pieces fell into place in Rachel's mind. The unusual injury patterns she'd observed in gang violence victims, the unexplained recoveries, the sophisticated medical knowledge the Syndicate seemed to possess. Harrison was continuing his twisted research, using the criminal underground as his personal laboratory. That's why you're here, Rachel concluded, her voice steady despite the implications. You're not just after the Syndicate. You need someone who understands those protocols, someone who can prove what Harrison's doing. We need you, Lieutenant, Martinez confirmed. You were our best combat medic, and you're the only one who saw the full scope of Harrison's program. Your testimony could shut him down permanently. The break room door opened as Tommy Chen burst in, his face pale with urgency. Rachel, 3 more ambulances coming in. They're saying it's different this time. The victims, they're showing signs of some kind of experimental treatment. Rachel exchanged glances with Martinez. Harrison was escalating, pushing his research to new levels. "How long until they arrive?" she asked, already moving toward the door. 5 minutes. But Rachel... Tommy hesitated, glancing nervously at Martinez. One of the security guards overheard them on the radio. The victims are talking about some kind of combat enhancement, something that makes them stronger, faster. They said the pain doesn't stop them anymore. Martinez cursed softly. "He's implementing Protocol Lazarus. Rachel, those files you took from Kandahar, they weren't just about medical procedures, were they?" Rachel's mind flashed to the hidden compartment in her apartment, where certain documents lay sealed away, documents that proved Harrison hadn't just been developing combat medicine, he'd been creating something far more dangerous. The Syndicate's not just his cover, Rachel realized, the full horror of Harrison's plan becoming clear. It's his testing ground. He's building an army, using criminals as his test subjects. She turned to Martinez, her decision made. "Those files you mentioned, I know where they are, but first we need to deal with what's coming through those doors." "Rachel," Sandra Cooper's voice carried from the hallway. "They're here." The older nurse's face appeared in the doorway, showing unusual concern. These patients, something's wrong with them. Their behavior, their strength, it's not natural. Rachel moved with purpose, her mind already shifting to combat medical. Protocols she'd hoped never to use again. "Tommy, get your father. Tell him we need to isolate these patients. Martinez, I hope you brought backup, because if these are Protocol Lazarus subjects, we're going to need it." As they headed towards the ambulance bay, Rachel caught her reflection in a window. For a moment, she saw herself as she'd been in Kandahar. Not just a combat medic, but someone who'd witnessed the darkness that could arise when military science lost its moral compass. Now that darkness had followed her home, threatening everything she'd built here, the ED doors opened, bringing with them the first of Harrison's enhanced subjects. Rachel could see it in their eyes, the unnatural strength, the absence of normal pain response, the aggression barely contained beneath their skin. Tonight would test every skill she possessed, both as a healer and a warrior. Martinez touched her arm briefly. "Ready, Lieutenant?" Rachel's response carried echoes of countless combat operations. "Always ready. Let's see what Colonel Harrison has created this time." The first Protocol Lazarus subject burst through his restraints like they were made of paper, sending 2 security guards flying across the trauma bay. Rachel moved with practiced precision, her muscle memory responding before conscious thought. The syringe in her hand found its mark with combat accuracy, delivering a specially formulated sedative directly into the man's carotid artery. "Standard sedatives won't hold them for long," Martinez warned, helping Rachel secure the patient with reinforced restraints. "Harrison's modifications affect their metabolism. They process drugs at 3 times the normal rate." She paused, watching. Rachel expertly managed the situation. "But you already knew that, didn't you?" Rachel's silence spoke volumes as she worked, her movements carrying the weight of dark knowledge. Through the trauma bay windows, she could see more enhanced subjects being brought in, their wounds already showing signs of accelerated healing. The sight triggered memories of classified briefings, of experiments performed in hidden facilities, of soldiers volunteering for procedures they didn't fully understand. "Miss Morrison," Tommy Chen's voice carried urgency as he appeared in the doorway. "There's a problem in the parking garage. 2 of the patients, they escaped from the ambulances. Before we could get them inside, they're hunting the medical staff." Martinez immediately reached for her concealed weapon, but Rachel stopped her with a gesture. "No gunfire in the hospital," she said quietly. "I have another way." She moved to a locked supply cabinet, her keycard accessing a hidden compartment that even Dr. Chen didn't know about. Inside lay a small case containing auto-injectors filled with a distinctive blue liquid. Modified neuroblockers, Rachel explained, catching Martinez's questioning look, developed as a countermeasure to Protocol Lazarus in case the subjects ever went rogue. You've been preparing for this, Martinez realized, watching Rachel efficiently. Distribute the injectors to select staff members. How long have you known Harrison was continuing the program? I suspected when I first saw the pattern of injuries coming into the ED, Rachel replied, checking the injector in her hand. The Syndicate's enforcers were healing too quickly, showing signs of enhanced strength, but I needed proof before I moved against them. Dr. Chen appeared, his face showing the strain of the situation. Rachel, what are we dealing with here? These patients, their physiological readings are off the charts. Heart rates that should be fatal, tissue regeneration that defies medical science. They're the result of a classified military program, Rachel explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen the darkness firsthand. Experimental combat enhancement protocols combined with advanced battlefield medicine. The program was supposed to create soldiers who could keep fighting despite catastrophic injuries. But something went wrong, Martinez added grimly. The enhancements affected their minds, increased aggression, decreased impulse control, eventual psychological breakdown. That's why the program was officially terminated. Officially, Rachel echoed, her tone bitter. But Harrison took the research underground, using the Syndicate to continue his work. These subjects are just the beginning. He's perfecting the process, creating an army that feels no pain, heals from almost any injury, and follows his orders without question. A crash from the parking garage interrupted their conversation, followed by screams. Through the windows, Rachel could see two enhanced subjects moving with inhuman speed, pursuing terrified hospital staff. Their movements were predatory, coordinated. These weren't mindless berserkers, but trained fighters enhanced beyond normal human limits. Sandra, lock down the ED, Rachel ordered, her combat medic persona fully emerging. No one in or out. Without authorization. Dr. Chen, get everyone who's not essential medical personnel to the secure areas we discussed. She turned to Martinez. Your backup team in position. Martinez nodded. Phoenix unit has the hospital perimeter secured. They're waiting for your signal. Rachel checked her supplies one final time. Neuroblockers, emergency medical gear, and items she'd hoped never to need again. Tommy, remember what I taught you about emergency protocols? The boy nodded, his young face showing determination despite his fear. Good. Stay with your father. Help coordinate the staff. These subjects will target medical personnel first. They're programmed to eliminate potential threats to their enhanced abilities. How do you know so much about their programming? Dr. Kim asked, having overheard the conversation. The young resident's face showed a mixture of fear and fascination. Because I helped design the medical protocols, Rachel admitted quietly, before I understood what Harrison really planned to do with them. These subjects aren't just enhanced soldiers, they're prototypes for something much worse. Harrison's using the Syndicate to perfect his process, but his real goal is to sell it to the highest bidder. The sounds of combat grew closer as the enhanced subjects moved through the parking garage, hunting with terrible efficiency. Rachel could hear them coordinating, using tactics that spoke of military training combined with their unnatural abilities. They're herding people toward the ED, Martinez observed grimly, using the civilians to force a confrontation. Rachel's expression hardened as she prepared to face the monsters she'd helped create. Sometimes healing meant confronting the source of the wound, even when that source lay in your own past. She turned to her colleagues, these people who'd become more than just co-workers. Whatever happens next, she said with quiet authority, remember your training. These subjects can be stopped, but it requires precision and timing. Don't try to engage them directly. Use the neuroblockers, and only when you have a clear shot. The sound of shattering glass announced the enhanced subject's entry into the ED proper. Rachel moved toward the threat, her movements carrying the deadly grace of someone trained for exactly this kind of nightmare. Behind her, Martinez coordinated with her team while the hospital staff implemented emergency protocols. The night was about to become a battlefield where medicine and combat merged into something unprecedented, and Rachel Morrison stood at the crossroads of both worlds, ready to face the darkness she'd helped unleash. Rachel moved through the darkened hospital corridors like a ghost, every step calculated and silent. The enhanced subjects had cut power to sections of the building, but darkness was an old friend from her combat medic days. Behind her, Martinez covered their advance, while Dr. Chen coordinated evacuation through their encrypted radios. "Movement ahead," Rachel whispered, her trained senses detecting what others might miss. Through the emergency lighting, she could see the unnatural way the subjects moved, too fluid, too fast, their enhanced bodies operating beyond human limitations. They were systematically hunting through the hospital, using tactics she recognized from special operations training. 3 more teams reporting similar subjects at other hospitals, Martinez muttered, checking her tactical pad. Harrison's launching a coordinated operation, but why target medical facilities? She glanced at Rachel, realization dawning. He's not just testing them, he's hunting for something specific. The countermeasure protocols, Rachel confirmed, her mind racing through implications. These subjects are prototypes, but they're unstable. Harrison needs the complete research to perfect the process. She paused, checking around a corner. Research that disappeared from Kandahar. A crash echoed from the pediatric ward, followed by the sound of breaking equipment. Rachel's heart rate spiked. That wing should have been evacuated, but if any children remained, the enhanced subjects showed no regard for civilian casualties. "Rachel!" Tommy's voice came through her earpiece, urgent but controlled. "Dad says 2 nurses are trapped in pediatrics with patients. They couldn't complete the evacuation in time." The boy's next words made her blood run cold. "One of the patients is my cousin Amy. She's still recovering from surgery." Sandra Cooper's voice joined the channel. "Security feeds show 4 enhanced subjects converging on that position. They're hunting methodically, clearing each room." The older nurse's tone carried grim understanding. "They're not just looking for research, they're eliminating witnesses." Rachel checked her remaining neuroblockers, mind already formulating tactics. "Martinez, get your team to the east entrance. If we time this right, we can funnel them into a choke point." She pulled a small case from her emergency kit, equipment she'd hoped never to use again. "I'll need 3 minutes." "What are you planning?" Martinez asked, recognizing the look in Rachel's eyes, the same expression she'd worn before certain classified operations in Kandahar. "Harrison's subjects have enhanced healing and strength, but their nervous systems are still human at the core." Rachel's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she prepared specialized equipment. "In Kandahar, we developed protocols to shut down enhanced subjects if they went rogue, emergency fail-safes built into the original program." "The fail-safes were deemed too dangerous," Martinez objected. "The mortality rate—" "That was the military version," Rachel cut her off, finishing her preparations. "I've spent the last 3 years perfecting a safer alternative. Now we find out if it works." Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the radio. "Rachel, whatever you're planning, be careful. These subjects, their behavior is escalating. They're showing signs of psychological breakdown, just like in the classified files." Rachel moved toward pediatrics, her steps silent despite her haste. The corridor ahead showed signs of violence, broken equipment, scattered supplies, and ominous blood smears on the walls. The enhanced subjects were growing more aggressive, their enhanced bodies pushing their minds toward inevitable collapse. Incoming! Martinez's warning came just as one of the subjects burst through a door, moving with terrifying speed. Rachel's training took over, her body flowing like water as she evaded the initial attack. The subject's strength was overwhelming, but his movements were predictable, military combat patterns enhanced by unnatural speed and power. Rachel's counterstrike was precisely targeted, the modified neuroblocker finding its mark in the subject's neck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his enhanced systems began to shut down, his movements becoming erratic before he collapsed. "It works," Martinez breathed, watching the subject convulse briefly before falling unconscious. "But we've only got 3 doses left and at least 6 more subjects in the building." Through the darkness, screams echoed from pediatrics. Rachel's decision was instant. "Get him secured. I'm heading to pediatrics." She grabbed extra supplies, knowing what she might face. "And Martinez, if this goes wrong, everything you need to know about the countermeasure program is in a sealed file in my apartment. Behind the medicine cabinet, there's a false panel." "Rachel," Martinez started, but Rachel was already moving, her steps carrying her toward the sounds of chaos. In her earpiece, she could hear Tommy coordinating with security, helping track the subject's movements through the hospital's surveillance system. The boy was proving as capable as she'd suspected. "Be advised," Sandra's voice came through the radio. "Subjects are showing increased aggression. Their vital signs are critical. Heart rates over 200, massive adrenal response. Harrison's enhancements are pushing them toward complete physiological breakdown." Rachel absorbed this information as she approached pediatrics, her mind already calculating strategies. She could hear the enhanced subjects now, their movements carrying the terrible efficiency of trained killers combined with inhuman power. Beyond them, frightened voices, the trapped nurses trying to keep their young patients quiet. The night was about to become very complicated, but Rachel Morrison had faced worse odds in darker places. Sometimes the hardest battles were fought not with weapons or medicine, but with the courage to face the consequences of your own past actions. The scene in pediatrics unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. 2 enhanced subjects had cornered the nurses and children in the playroom, their movements carrying the terrible precision of predators. Through the observation window, Rachel could see Amy Chen huddled behind a play structure, the young girl's recent surgical scar visible on her arm. The nurses had positioned themselves between the subjects and the children, showing courage that made Rachel's heart ache. "Their biochemical readings are off the charts," Martinez whispered, checking a specialized scanner. "Harrison's latest version of the enhancement protocol is burning them out from the inside. They've got maybe 20 minutes before complete system failure." Rachel processed this information with the cold efficiency of a combat medic. The subject's deteriorating condition made them more dangerous. They had nothing left to lose. Her hand tightened on her remaining neuroblockers as she analyzed the situation. 2 doses left, 2 subjects in the room, and at least 4 more somewhere in the hospital. "Rachel." Tommy's voice came through her earpiece, controlled despite his fear. "Security feeds show the other subjects converging on your position. They're moving with purpose, like they knew exactly where to find you." "Of course they did," Rachel muttered, sudden understanding dawning. "Harrison's using them to flush me out. He knows I'm the only one who can prove what he's doing." She turned to Martinez. "We need to end this fast before—" The enhanced subject's attack came with devastating speed, crashing through the observation window in a shower of safety glass. Rachel moved on pure instinct, rolling away from the lethal strike that would have crushed her skull. The subject's enhanced strength had torn through the reinforced window like paper, but his movements carried the telltale signs of system degradation, micro-tremors, overextended strikes, the beginning of the end. Inside the playroom, chaos erupted. The second subject launched himself at the nurses, but years of combat training took over as Rachel vaulted through the broken window. Her first neuroblocker found its mark in the subject's neck, the specialized compound beginning its work immediately. He stumbled, enhanced systems shutting down one by one, before crashing into a shelf of children's books. "Get them out!" Rachel ordered the nurses, who immediately began moving the children toward the emergency exit. But the first subject was already recovering, his enhanced healing allowing him to shrug off injuries that would have incapacitated a normal person. Martinez engaged him with practiced skill, her military training evident in every move. But the subject's enhanced strength made him nearly impossible to contain. Rachel knew they had maybe seconds before the other subjects arrived, drawn by the sound of combat. "Rachel, behind you!" Tommy's warning came just as another subject burst through the playroom's main door. 3 more were visible in the hallway, their movements coordinated despite their deteriorating condition. Rachel's heart sank. 1 neuroblocker left, and 5 enhanced subjects to deal with. The fight that followed pushed Rachel to her absolute limits. Years of combat medicine had taught her human anatomy in intimate detail, knowledge she now used to target weak points, to evade strikes that would have pulverized normal bones, to stay alive against opponents who seemed almost invincible. Martinez was a blur of tactical precision beside her, but even their combined skills were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers and enhanced strength. A glancing blow sent Rachel crashing into a medical cart, equipment scattering across the floor. Through blurred vision, she saw Amy Chen still trapped behind the play structure, the young girl's eyes wide with terror. "Lieutenant!" Martinez's shout carried warning as 2 subjects moved to flank them. Rachel's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Then her eyes fell on the scattered medical equipment, and an idea formed, desperate, probably suicidal, but better than watching these children die. "Martinez, remember Kandahar, Operation Blacklight?" Rachel's words carried meaning that only another Phoenix unit member would understand. Martinez's eyes widened as she caught Rachel's meaning. "That protocol was unstable," she objected, ducking. "Under an enhanced strike, the neural feedback alone could, better than letting Harrison's subjects tear this hospital apart," Rachel countered, already moving to gather specific items from the scattered supplies. Years of emergency medicine combined with classified military knowledge as she worked, assembling something that hadn't been attempted since that dark day in Kandahar. The enhanced subjects pressed their attack, but Martinez held them back with desperate skill, buying Rachel the seconds she needed. Through her earpiece, she could hear Tommy coordinating with security, Dr. Chen organizing emergency protocols, Sandra Cooper managing the ED's crisis response. These people, her people, were counting on her. "Martinez, get Amy out. Everyone, else clear the floor." Rachel's voice carried the unmistakable command of someone about to do something either brilliant or fatal. The modified medical equipment in her hands hummed with dangerous potential as she faced the enhanced subjects. "Whatever happens next," she said softly, "remember that healing sometimes means making hard choices." Then she activated the device, and the world exploded into chaos as classified military science met desperate courage in a suburban hospital corridor. The night was far from over, and Rachel Morrison was about to demonstrate why the Phoenix unit had considered her their most dangerous combat medic, not for her ability to heal, but for her understanding of how the human body could be pushed to its absolute limits. And what happened when those limits finally broke? The makeshift device emitted a high-frequency pulse that made every enhanced subject in range stumble, their modified nervous systems overwhelmed by the targeted feedback. Rachel knew she had seconds at most. The pulse would only temporarily disrupt Harrison's protocols before their enhanced healing adapted. "Now!" she shouted to Martinez, who immediately grabbed Amy Chen and retreated toward the secure area. The enhanced subjects were already recovering, but their movements showed signs of increased instability. The pulse had accelerated their deterioration, just as it had during the classified tests in Kandahar. Through her earpiece, Dr. Chen's voice carried urgent concern. "Rachel, their biological readings are critical. Whatever you just did." He paused, checking monitors. "Their enhanced healing is going into overdrive, trying to compensate. It's burning them out even faster." "That's the point," Rachel replied grimly, dodging a strike that cracked the wall behind her. "Harrison's subjects aren't just enhanced. They're linked. Their protocols are networked, sharing data in real time to improve combat effectiveness." She pressed the device's activation switch again, sending another pulse through the corridor. "Every time they adapt, the information spreads through their network." Martinez caught on immediately. "You're using their own enhancement against them, forcing their systems to burn out, trying to counter the disruption." Her voice carried both admiration and horror. "But the neural feedback will be fatal," Rachel confirmed, watching the subjects struggle to coordinate their attacks. Their movements were becoming erratic, enhanced strength working against deteriorating control. "Unless Harrison implements the shutdown sequence, the same sequence hidden in the files I took from Kandahar." Tommy's voice cut through the tactical channel. "Rachel, new vehicles entering the hospital grounds, military-grade SUVs, security cameras show armed men deploying and—" He hesitated. "There's someone in a suit. The guards are treating him like he's in charge." "Harrison," Rachel and Martinez said simultaneously. The colonel had finally shown himself, drawn out by the threat to his enhanced soldiers. "He'll have the shutdown codes," Martinez added, securing the pediatric evacuation route. "But why risk exposure by coming himself?" Rachel's laugh was bitter as combat medicine. "Because he knows what this device really is. It's not just disrupting his subjects, it's gathering data. Every adaptation, every response, everything his enhanced soldiers do to counter it." She tapped her earpiece. "Tommy, is the hospital's secure server still recording?" "Yes," the boy confirmed, "just like you showed me. Every biological reading, every scanner output, it's all being logged and encrypted." "Evidence," Martinez breathed. "In understanding. You're documenting exactly how his protocols work, proving they're connected to the Kandahar program. That's why you've been working in the ED. You were gathering proof." A thunderous crash interrupted them as one of the subjects literally tore a medical cabinet from the wall, hurling it with devastating force. Rachel barely evaded, but the distraction cost her. Another subject landed a glancing blow that sent her rolling across the floor, the disruption device skittering away. "Rachel!" Sandra Cooper's voice carried urgent warning. "Security feed shows Harrison's men entering through the loading dock. They're carrying specialized equipment. Looks like some kind of medical tech." Rachel forced herself up, ignoring protesting ribs. "He's bringing stabilization gear, trying to save his enhanced soldiers before the neural feedback kills them." Her mind raced through implications. "But he'll have to implement the shutdown sequence first, and that means—" "Exposing himself," Martinez finished, "using the same classified protocols you stole from Kandahar, protocols that were never officially sanctioned." Through the chaos, Rachel could hear Harrison's team moving closer, their operations carried out with military precision. The colonel was gambling, everything on saving his enhanced subjects, his only working prototypes of the latest enhancement protocol. "Tommy," Rachel commanded, "lock down the secure server, transfer everything to the backup site just like we planned." She shared a meaningful look with Martinez. "If anything happens to me, make sure that data reaches the right people." "Already done," Tommy replied, his young voice carrying surprising steel. "Dad's implementing total lockdown on all hospital systems. Harrison's team won't be able to erase anything without physical access to the servers." Rachel retrieved the disruption device, checking its power levels. 1 maybe 2 more pulses before it burned out. Through the hospital's emergency lighting, she could see the enhanced subjects struggling to maintain coordination. Their enhanced healing was working overtime, trying to counter damage that grew worse with every adaptation. Martinez, get to the server room. Harrison will send teams to destroy the evidence. Rachel checked her remaining medical supplies, mind already formulating tactics. I'll keep his attention here. Rachel, Martinez objected. These readings? The subjects are reaching critical failure. When they crash, the neural feedback will cascade through their entire network. Anyone connected to their enhancement protocols will be affected. I know, Rachel replied softly. That's what I'm counting on. Harrison won't let his life's work die. He'll try to save them. And when he does, she activated the disruption. Device one final time, watching the enhanced subject stagger under its influence. He'll have to expose everything he's been hiding since Kandahar. The sound of tactical teams deploying echoed through the hospital corridors. Rachel Morrison stood ready, a combat medic preparing to face the darkness she'd helped create. Sometimes healing meant confronting the source of the infection, no matter the personal cost. Behind her, the enhanced subjects struggled to their feet, their movements betraying the approaching systemic failure. Ahead, Harrison's teams moved with precise purpose, led by a man whose ambition had corrupted everything Rachel had once believed in. The night was about to reach its turning point, and Rachel knew that when it did, only one version of the truth would survive. Colonel James Harrison strode through the hospital corridors with military precision, his expensive suit incongruous among his tactical team's combat gear. Through the emergency lighting, Rachel could see his face, older than in Kandahar, but carrying the same cold ambition that had turned a medical research program into something monstrous. Lieutenant Morrison, his voice carried the command. Presence that had once inspired soldiers to volunteer for his experiments, still trying to play hero. Your disruption pulse is killing them, subjects we could have used to save countless lives. Like you saved lives in Kandahar, Rachel's reply cut through the tense air. Behind her, the enhanced subjects had fallen to their knees, their systems approaching total failure. These aren't soldiers anymore, Colonel. They're test subjects. For something you plan to sell to the highest bidder. Harrison's laugh was cold as surgical steel. Always so righteous. But you helped create these protocols, Lieutenant. Your combat medicine expertise made the enhancement process possible. Their blood is on your hands, too. Through her earpiece, Tommy's voice carried urgent information. Rachel, Martinez has secured the server room, but Harrison's team is trying to breach the ED's secure wing. Dad's holding them off, but static interrupted the transmission as Harrison's people began jamming communications. Trying to expose me, Rachel. Harrison moved closer, his tactical team covering him with practiced efficiency. Those files you stole, they're classified for a reason. Some advances require sacrifice. The Phoenix unit understood that once. The Phoenix unit understood limits, Rachel countered, watching Harrison's every move. Years of combat medicine had taught her to read body language. The colonel was worried, though he hid it well. We were supposed to save lives, not create unstoppable. Soldiers for the highest bidder. A scream of agony from one of the enhanced subjects punctuated her words. The neural feedback was reaching critical levels, their enhanced healing unable to counter the cascading damage. Harrison's face tightened. These were his only working prototypes of the latest protocol. The shutdown sequence, he demanded, pulling out a specialized tablet. Together we might still save them. Think of the medical applications, the lives we could, like you thought of lives when you sold the original protocol to the Shadow Syndicate. Rachel's words struck like precision strikes. Using them to test improvements, turning criminals into enhanced soldiers while you perfected the process? Harrison's mask of control cracked slightly. You don't understand. The military abandoned us, called our work too dangerous, but some advances require freedom from bureaucratic restraints. The Syndicate provided resources, test subjects, human beings. Rachel cut him off, her voice carrying the weight of every patient she'd tried to save. People you turned into weapons until their bodies and minds burned out. And now you're ready to sell the perfected protocol to anyone with enough money, aren't you? Through the hospital's emergency lighting, Rachel could see more tactical teams moving into position. Harrison was surrounding her, preparing to take what he wanted by force. But he'd forgotten something crucial about combat medics. They were trained to see vulnerabilities. "Your enhanced soldiers are dying, Colonel," she stated coldly. "Their systems are linked, remember? The neural feedback is cascading through their network. In about 2 minutes, everything you've built will be lost, unless I implement the shutdown sequence," Harrison finished, his expression darkening. "The same sequence documented in those files you stole." "You're forcing my hand, Lieutenant, trying to make me expose classified protocols." Rachel's smile was sharp as a surgical blade. "The hospital systems are recording everything, Colonel. Every biological reading, every enhancement signature. When you implement that sequence, you'll prove the connection to Kandahar, to the unauthorized experiments, to the illegal sales." A burst of gunfire interrupted her as one of the enhanced subjects lost control completely, his deteriorating mind triggering combat responses. Harrison's tactical team responded with practiced efficiency, but their bullets seemed to barely slow the enhanced soldier. "Implement the sequence," Rachel demanded, watching more subjects begin to lose control. "Or watch everything you've built tear itself apart. Your choice, Colonel." Harrison's hands moved across his tablet with desperate speed as another enhanced subject went berserk. The Colonel had spent years building his shadow empire, perfecting protocols that would make him millions. Now it was all unraveling. "You'll burn with me," he snarled, entering commands. "Once they know your role in developing these protocols." "I've already burned," Rachel replied quietly, watching the shutdown sequence begin. "That's why I'm the one who has to end it." The enhanced subjects collapsed as Harrison's commands took effect, their systems shutting down one by one. But Rachel knew the hospital's servers were recording everything, every line of code, every classified protocol, everything that proved Harrison's connection to both Kandahar and the Shadow Syndicate. Through her damaged earpiece, she could hear Tommy coordinating with Martinez, ensuring the data reached the right people. The boy had learned well. Sometimes the most important battles were won not with weapons or medicine, but with information. Harrison's tactical team moved to surround her, but the Colonel's attention was fixed on his tablet, desperately trying to save his life's work. He didn't see Rachel's hand move to the disruption device one final time. Didn't understand until too late that sometimes the most effective treatment required removing the source of the infection. The night wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Rachel Morrison stood ready, knowing that the hardest part was still to come, because some wounds couldn't be healed until the truth was fully exposed, no matter how much that truth might hurt. The disruption device's final pulse hit Harrison's. Systems like a surgical strike, overloading not just the enhanced subject's neural networks, but every piece of connected medical technology the Colonel had brought. His tablet sparked and died, taking the shutdown sequence with it. The enhanced subjects convulsed as their systems went into terminal cascade. "What have you done?" Harrison's voice carried genuine fear for the first time. "Those protocols, they were the only thing keeping them stable." "No, Colonel," Rachel replied, watching the chaos unfold. "They were the thing killing them. The human body wasn't meant for this kind of enhancement. You knew that after Kandahar, but you kept pushing anyway." Through the hospital's emergency systems, alarms blared as the enhanced subject's vital signs reached critical levels. Harrison's tactical team moved uncertainly, caught between their training and the deteriorating situation. "Rachel!" Martinez's voice crackled through her damaged earpiece. The data's been transmitted. Phoenix unit teams are moving in, but Harrison's people have control of the main exits. They're trying to... The transmission cut off as another wave of jamming hit the hospital's communications. Tommy's voice broke through moments later, the boy having found a way around the jamming. Dad says Harrison's men are pulling back from the ED. They're destroying evidence, setting fires in specific locations. Rachel's tactical mind processed the implications instantly. He's trying to cover his tracks. A hospital fire would destroy any physical evidence of his experiments. She turned to Harrison, seeing the desperate calculation in his eyes. How many more people have to die to protect your secrets, Colonel? You don't understand, Harrison snarled, his careful control cracking. These protocols, they're worth billions. Military contracts, private security firms, governments willing to pay anything for enhanced soldiers. I won't let you destroy everything I've built. The Colonel's words were cut off as one of his dying subjects lashed out with final enhanced strength, sending tactical team members flying. Rachel moved with combat medic efficiency, pulling injured personnel to safety even as Harrison's remaining. Men opened fire. The neural feedback is spreading through their network, she announced coldly. Every enhanced soldier you've created, every test subject you've modified, they're all connected. The cascade failure will burn through their entire system. Harrison's face showed the first signs of real panic. That's impossible. The protocols were isolated, each subject separately. You linked them yourself, Rachel cut him off. Every improvement, every adaptation shared across the network, creating the perfect learning system for your enhanced soldiers. But systems can be overloaded, Colonel. You taught me that in Kandahar. Through her earpiece, she could hear the situation deteriorating across the hospital. Enhanced subjects were falling into critical condition, their modified bodies unable to handle the cascading neural feedback. Harrison's careful experiments were collapsing, taking his dreams of profit with them. Dad's securing the ED, Tommy reported, his young voice steady despite the chaos. But Rachel, the fires are spreading. Harrison's men use some kind of accelerant. Standard suppression systems aren't working. Martinez's voice joined the channel. Phoenix unit is engaging Harrison's teams at all exits, but these fires, they're targeted. They're going to reach the central servers soon. Rachel watched Harrison process this information, saw the moment he decided to sacrifice everything to escape prosecution. The Colonel turned to his remaining men, issuing rapid orders. They would burn the hospital, destroy all evidence of his experiments, escape in the chaos. Think about what you're doing. Rachel's voice carried the authority of someone who'd seen the worst of combat medicine. There are patients who can't be evacuated, children in critical care. How many more lives are you willing to sacrifice? For a moment, something human flickered in Harrison's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation that had led him to experiment on soldiers, to sell dangerous protocols to criminals, to value profit over human life. Sometimes advancement requires sacrifice, he stated, signaling his men to move out. You used to understand that, Lieutenant, before you let conscience make you weak. Rachel's laugh was bitter as battlefield medicine. No, Colonel. Conscience didn't make me weak. It made me remember why we took our oaths in the first place. To heal, not to harm. To save lives, not destroy them for profit. The hospital's emergency lighting flickered as fires began to affect crucial systems. Through the chaos, Rachel could hear evacuation orders being issued, could smell smoke beginning to fill the corridors. Harrison's men were moving with tactical precision, setting charges at key structural points. Rachel. Tommy's voice carried desperate urgency. Martinez says you need to get out. The building's integrity. Harrison's protocols are still active in the system. She cut him off, watching the Colonel retreat with his remaining forces. If those servers burn, we lose everything. All the evidence, all the proof of what he did. The evidence isn't worth your life. Martinez's voice joined the channel. Let Phoenix Unit handle Harrison. We need you alive to testify. But Rachel Morrison had made her decision. Sometimes healing meant making impossible choices, meant risking everything to stop the infection at its source. She moved through the smoke-filled corridors with combat medic precision, following Harrison's team. The night had reached its critical point, and Rachel knew that what happened next would determine not just her fate, but the fate of every person affected by Harrison's twisted experiments. Some battles were fought with medicine, others with weapons, but this one would be fought with the one thing the Colonel had never understood: the unwavering commitment to do what was right, no matter the personal cost. Rachel tracked Harrison's team through the burning hospital with methodical precision, her combat medic training allowing her to predict their movements. The Colonel was heading for the hospital's secure data center, not to destroy it, she realized, but to extract crucial data before setting the final charges. He's after his backup protocols, she spoke into her partially functioning earpiece. The servers don't just contain evidence. They have his latest research, everything he needs to restart the program somewhere else. Martinez's voice crackled through static. Rachel, the building's becoming unstable. Fire suppressants are failing on multiple floors. If those charges go off, then we lose everything. Rachel cut her off, moving through smoke-filled corridors. All the proof, all the data about his test subjects. He'll escape, rebuild, start experimenting on people again. Through the emergency lighting, she could see Harrison's tactical team setting up defensive positions. They were buying time, ensuring the Colonel could retrieve what he needed. Rachel's mind raced through options, calculating risks with battlefield efficiency. Tommy, I need a path to the server room that avoids Harrison's men. She paused, checking her remaining medical supplies. And I need to know exactly what firefighting systems are still operational in that section. The boy's response was immediate, proving again why Rachel had chosen to trust him. Maintenance tunnel through the old wing. It's not on modern blueprints. Dad used it during the hospital's renovation. A pause as he checked systems. Server room has specialized fire suppression, separate from the main grid. But Rachel, the heat levels in that section. Temperatures approaching critical. Sandra Cooper's voice joined the channel. Those servers weren't designed to handle this kind of sustained heat. Even if Harrison gets his data, the hardware won't survive much longer. Rachel moved with renewed purpose, her path taking her through less traveled sections of the hospital. The maintenance tunnel was narrow, filled with decades of forgotten equipment, but it would get her where she needed to go. Martinez, status. On the enhanced subjects, she asked, knowing the answer would affect Harrison's timeline. Terminal cascade through their entire network, Martinez reported grimly. The Syndicate's enforcers are dropping across the city. Harrison's prototype soldiers are either dead or in critical condition. Whatever you did with that disruption pulse, it worked better than we anticipated. Rachel processed this information. As she navigated the old tunnel, Harrison had lost his enhanced soldiers, his test subjects, and soon his research facility. All he had left was the data, the protocols that would let him start over somewhere else. Rachel. Tommy's urgent voice cut through her thoughts. Dad says Harrison's men just breached the server room's outer security. They're using some kind of specialized equipment to bypass the locks. Through the tunnel's aging walls, Rachel could feel vibrations, Harrison's team setting more charges. They were planning to bring down this entire section of the hospital, ensuring no evidence survived their escape. Tell your father to focus on evacuation, Rachel ordered, approaching the server room from below. Get everyone out. Once Harrison has what he wants, this place becomes expendable. She emerged from the tunnel into a maintenance alcove. The server. Room's reinforced door visible through waves of heat. Harrison's men had indeed breached the outer security, and she could hear the Colonel's voice issuing rapid orders. Download everything, he commanded. "Every protocol, every enhancement signature. Once we have the data, set the final charges. This entire wing burns." Rachel checked her remaining equipment. Medical supplies that could become weapons, and the right hands, knowledge that could be turned to tactical advantage. She thought of every patient Harrison had experimented on, every soldier he'd enhanced and discarded, every life destroyed by his ambition. "Tommy," she spoke softly into her earpiece, "remember what I taught you about the hospital's backup systems, about why we prepare for the worst?" "Yes," the boy replied, understanding dawning in his voice. "The isolated servers, the ones not connected to the main network. You said sometimes keeping things separate was the best protection." Rachel smiled grimly. "Harrison thinks he's downloading everything. He doesn't know about the secure backups, doesn't realize we've been documenting his experiments separately for months." She moved closer to the server room entrance, calculating timing. "Your father has those backups?" "Safe in the ED's secure storage," Tommy confirmed. "All the evidence, everything you collected about the enhanced subjects. Martinez's team is protecting it now." Through the reinforced glass, Rachel could see Harrison working frantically at a terminal, his men securing the room with professional efficiency. The colonel was so focused on his download that he didn't notice the temperature rising, didn't see the crucial systems beginning to fail. "Rachel," Martinez's voice carried warning, "whatever you're planning, those charges they've set, if they detonate, sometimes healing means making hard choices." Rachel cut her off, moving into position. "Harrison's trying to save his research, but he forgot something important about hospitals." She checked the server room's environmental controls one final time. "We build them to contain disasters." The night had reached its final phase, and Rachel Morrison prepared to face the man who had corrupted everything she once believed in. Sometimes the hardest battles weren't fought with weapons or medicine, but with the courage to ensure that some infections could never spread again. Colonel Harrison's triumphant expression turned to horror as Rachel triggered the server room's specialized containment protocols, systems designed for catastrophic biological hazards, now repurposed for one final act of containment. Sealed blast doors slammed down as temperatures soared, servers melting under extreme heat, while Harrison's men scrambled uselessly at the reinforced barriers. "You'll die too!" Harrison screamed, realizing too late that his former combat medic had outmaneuvered him. But Rachel Morrison just smiled, remembering every patient who had suffered because of his ambition. "Sometimes stopping the infection means making the ultimate sacrifice," she replied calmly. The charges his men had set detonated, but the containment held, focusing the devastation inward. The last thing Colonel Harrison saw was the face of the combat medic who had finally brought his experiments to an end. But Rachel Morrison didn't die that night. Martinez's team found her in the maintenance tunnel, protected from the blast by the hospital's original architecture and her own precise timing. The evidence preserved on the backup servers led to the complete dismantling of Harrison's network and the Shadow Syndicate's operations. Today, Pine Valley Regional Hospital has a new trauma response protocol developed by their lead ED nurse, a protocol that saves lives without compromising ethics. And if you look carefully, you might see Rachel Morrison still working the night shift, moving with that distinctive grace that speaks of battlefield medicine and unwavering courage. Some say the most dangerous warriors are the ones who heal before they fight. Rachel Morrison proved just how right they were. If this story touched you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's tale might just be our best one yet. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read every single one. See you in the next story.